Good morning to SFG Top Performance. SFG Top Performance podcast will be produced as a Zoom presentation. SFG is concerned about the coronavirus and we are trying to avoid large groups or close contact. We will continue to give the same great information and to help you going forward. With us today will be Charles, Derrick, and Jason. Charles, do you want to give us an update on equipment and work being done?
Yes, I can. Weather's been really great for us the last month here. We've been applying Supergrow, fertilizer, lime, and hydrous. We couldn't have had any better weather for what we did. I think we had a stretch there. We ran 8-9 days straight with anhydrous. Got a lot of acres done, a lot of gas, a lot of tons went out the door. I don't think one of the good things about this fall, you can do a lot of that work and it wasn't freezing your butt off out there working on a toolbar. Usually when you're working on out there with anhydrous, you're freezing and got every piece of clothes on just to keep warm, but it's been really nice working conditions. Same thing with lime. Lime has been coming out of the trucks great. We had a little trouble here with the moisture that we got, made it so it's a little harder to get in and out of the fields, but we're working around that. And I think we got one rig running lime, and there was at one time running 3 rigs on dry fertilizer. So we think here in the next week or so, it looks like the weather's going to turn out. We can get back in the fields and get one last run on anhydrous here. So that'd be it.
Okay, good. Coming up soon now is going to be prepay season. We're looking here at the end of December. Everybody wants to go through their taxes and try to make arrangements. Do I need to make a payment this year in 2020, or do I need to do something in 2021? We will have prices available. The best thing for you to do today is contact your agronomist, get your agronomy plan up to date so we know real quick what we have to do on it. You can look it over at the agronomy plan is being assembled as to how much income you're going to have to use for this year and to match your expenses, or if you want to move it to the next year, however you want to set up. It allows for easier for all of us to do that. So do work with your agronomist, get your plans put together, and we are assembling some very good in-season and prepay prices coming here for December. Jason, do you want to give us an update on the importance of a 2-pass chemical program?
Yes, as we're prepaying, I often hear, well, is there any way I can cut any money on my chemical program? And often, trying to save a little money there can end up costing you a lot. The most important thing is to keep your field clean all year. If you don't have to kill the weeds, it's easier to keep them under control. So, if you come out early in the spring with a multiple mode of action pre, and this is both on corn and soybeans, we don't have a lot of new chemistry coming on the market. So if we have some escapes and stuff, there isn't going to be a lot, in the future to handle it if what we have now isn't doing it. There's not a lot of new chemistry on the market. There's a lot of mixes of the old chemistry, but not a lot of new chemistry on the market to help our, we're having trouble killing weeds. So, the biggest thing is to get multiple modes of action out and make sure we start with a clean field and then come back with a good post with another layer of residual to keep us weed free and keep us from having any weeds come up, so we don't have a problem with some tolerances in the future. So, I don't think saving money on your chemicals is going to save money in the long run, but as long as we keep multiple modes of action, we'll be fine. There are some things we can do to save some money. Derrick, you've been working on some soybean population. Can you talk a little about some of your trials there?
Yeah, sure can. We had 3 soybean population trials out in fields this year. And what we did is we had 2 of them make yield zones where we broke the field up with high yield, medium yield, and low yield in those areas. And on soybeans, it's actually kind of the opposite of corn. On soybeans, you put more beans out in the low yield area to help get more beans out in those areas to see if they'll yield better. And in the high areas, beans can bush enough that we can get away with a little bit of lower population in those good areas. And our trials this year really showed that definitely showed up, especially if we start lower in population. And we're not talking big swings. The biggest swing I had, I kind of had a fun strip in there of 110,000, and that's plenty low, but we had one little block of it, and it seemed to really work. But I wouldn't want to do that over a whole field, just in case something happens, then we're going to get into not having enough cover. But had three population trials, and really across the board, it did what it was supposed to. The high yield zones with the lower yield or the lower population yielded better than the other ones. So it made sense. And in those areas, we're still getting the 60, 65 bushel beans, and we're lowering the population down, in some areas 10 to 20,000. I had a strip trial on a field where I did 120,000 population strips and 160,000 population strips. I had 3 each, and then put a normal 140,000 strip in there. And really, in the good areas of the field, the 120,000 yielded the same as the 160,000. So we get caught between, wanting to sell beans and, saving some money out on the farm. But, we can capture some really good yield in these good areas of the field and lower some population. So that saves some costs. And you just want to make sure that you have the right bean for it. We have a couple beans in our lineup that they don't bush a lot. They're just more of a straight up, just tall bean, don't bush. So I wouldn't want to lower the population there a lot, because then we won't have as much canopy cover, and then we get into weed control and everything along those lines. But that's what we're seeing from these population trials it's shown, and we're gonna do some more testing of it to see. Right now, I'd say in those high yields we can reduce by 10, 20,000 probably 20,000 population at the most. In the high yield areas, it followed what it was supposed to be, that the high population was a lower yield, but I didn't necessarily see the benefit of increasing the population there. So we still got to look at it some, but we're definitely seeing some really good benefits from lowering that population in the high yield zones, Jason.
With those, question for you, Derrick. When we start lowering the population, do we have to be more concerned about our pesticide program? Talk a little bit about that if you could. And Jason, if you could help him a little bit with that.
Yes, you do. Anytime you lower the population, we still need to make sure we're getting canopy cover. That's why, we had that one spot of 110,000. You don't want to go too low, because then you're not going to get canopy cover as quick, and then you're going to have to spend more on chemicals, and it kind of defeats the purpose of what we're trying to do. So it's a really big balancing situation. But even, I haven't put the numbers to it, but if you reduce by 10,000, that's pretty close to $3.50 an acre or something right there. So it's really it's an easy way, and as long as you have a good planter, as long as it's an even stand, you'll be just fine. But yes, you don't want to get too low. Do you kind of agree with that, Jason?
Yes, I do. As long we have to keep our canopy up. That canopy is our weed control in late summer until the leaves start falling off. After we lose some of the residuals, and as beans start to grow, we depend on that for weed control. So yes, I agree. We need to keep our population just heavy enough to keep a good canopy to keep the weeds from emerging. I agree with that 100%, Derrick.
Yep. Jason, Derrick, could you bring me up a little bit on how the micros are doing and the sulfurs specifically, how that's working with fertilizer application?
Yes, in the last couple of weeks, I've talked to 3 different growers, and I used some microzinc and sulfur both on and in combination. And boy, those 3 farmers said, I don't know what you used for micros last year, but I want that again. So last year, that product really worked on especially soybeans and also corn. But one guy told me it brought 40 bushel to his cornfield. I don't know if I believe that's all where it came from, but I'm pretty confident that it did help his yields. I think just some fertilizer in general helps in some areas, and maybe have been neglected a little bit, but adding micros has definitely helped with this past growing season in both corn and soybeans. And the sulfur, the 10 to adding sulfur to the nitrogen and sulfur ratio definitely is required. I think if we're not adding at least 10 pounds, we're losing. 20 is definitely better. So that is the piece that if we're not keeping whatever the minimum is, whatever our limiting factor is, that's what's going to limit our yield. And I think the sulfur and the micros is where our limiting factor has been in the last several years. And if we're not paying attention to that, that's going to be, it doesn't matter how much P and K we put at it or nitrogen, we're going to have to, add some sulfur and some micros. So they're not our limiting factor. So Derrick, I know you did a lot of trials on this. I know you were very excited about the outcome of them. Are you seeing the same results?
Yes, we are. Just to kind of reiterate, I spoke about our corn trials with sulfur and microsync, and we were seeing really good benefits. I mean, it was 12 to 15 bushel consistently across all strips. That's paying. In the big areas, like you say, we're going to see the big swings, the 25, the 30 bushel, and then as a whole, if we can show an average of 15 bushel really on any input, then I'm happy with that, and we're seeing that. On the soybean side, I didn't have a lot of the dry microsync trials out in fields. We had some of that in our insight plot, and we can go over that data at any time too. But in the field trials, we had foliar microsync products that you mix in with the chemicals, and we saw some really good responses there. I had nine trials, and 7 of them showed positive responses. And what I found really interesting, when we think about soybean micros, we think about manganese first. In corn, it's zinc, but in soybean, it's manganese. And every time we put manganese in it, we had a positive response. But then we did a lot of testing to see what zinc would do in our trials. And zinc in it showed up probably more consistently than the manganese did, even, which that surprised me. But that shows me that we might need to be focusing on zinc as well in the soybeans, and that's why we really like to use our micro packages. Like the microsync's got zinc, manganese, boron in it, and then our foliar products are all packaged with multiple micros in it, and there's not a lot of extra cost involved with adding them. And we're showing consistent good responses when we are spoon feeding these crops. So yes, it's something we want to do, and we want to look at on. You don't necessarily want to take every field, just because there's some fields that won't ever do more than 50 bushel beans. But the ones that we can go after some yield and push, beans respond, especially in corn. Corn does too. We can get more out of these fields. But that's what we're seeing, Jason. And if anyone wants to see any of this information, reach out to any of us, and we'll bring it out to you.
Derrick, it's kind of short notice to ask you this, but the cropland corn has zinc as part of their seed treatment. Is that a benefit there, or should I put it on a different way? Is it good enough to last all season, or do I still need to be side dressing some? I'm going over the top later on with some zinc. What are your feelings towards that?
Sure. So just to go back to what the cropland seed treatment is, it's called Fortivent Plus, and it contains Fortivent zinc on it, and that's a coating around the treatment that goes right on the seed. And what it's for is that early season root development, where that's what it does in corn plants. It promotes that early season root growth. So it's very, very important at that time. That's the best time to have zinc, really. That's why we want to get zinc before the corn's up. We want to get, because it needs it early. Now, as we know from seed treatments, it's not a lot of volume on the seed, and zinc for 200 bushel removal, it removes maybe 0.25 of a pound in a year, but we're not getting that much on the treatment. That treatment is just kind of acts like a starter fertilizer. Just pop it out of the ground, and we still need a little more zinc. If that's your limiting factor, the treatment won't be enough, but it's definitely a place to start and build into the package. And it comes on the cropland corn on every single seed. So it's a really good way to get zinc out on your farm.
Okay. Well, we've covered quite a bit today. We've talked about equipment. Charles gave us a great update on that. We know prepay season is right around the corner for us. We talked about the importance of 2-pass chemicals, plot data from Derrick, the micros, sulfur, the zinc. We're getting a lot of good information here. And I want to thank each of you today for working with our presentation here. And we'll see you again in 2 weeks. Thank you.